Hello, dear friends. I'm Beatrice, and welcome back to Beatrice's Quiet Tales, where real people share the moments that completely changed their lives. Today's letter came from a woman in Texas named Martha. She spent decades building hospitals instead of chasing headlines, and she thought retirement would finally bring peace. Instead, she found herself standing in a maternity ward while her own daughter-in-law publicly called her a useless old miser. Before we begin, tell me something a little different today. Instead of just saying where you're watching from, tell me what's one thing your town is known for. Maybe it's the barbecue, a famous bridge, endless cornfields, or simply the nicest neighbors you've ever met. I always enjoy reading those little pieces of home. Stay with me until the end, because after Martha finishes her story, I'd like to share two lessons that quietly stood out to me. They're not dramatic, but they might save someone a great deal of heartache. Now, let's hear Martha's story. She thought I was just an old woman with a checkbook. I don't care if you have to sell your house. Those were the first words my daughter-in-law said to me that morning. Not hello, not congratulations, not the baby's coming, just that. She stood in the lobby of one of the most expensive maternity hospitals in Texas, 8 months pregnant, pointing a perfectly manicured finger inches from my face while half the waiting room stared. "You've had your life," Chloe said loudly enough for strangers to hear. "Your money should be helping your family now." My son Kevin didn't interrupt. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. Instead, he stared at the polished floor as though the pattern in the marble had suddenly become the most fascinating thing in Texas. That's when I realized I wasn't being invited to celebrate my first grandchild. I had been summoned to pay, and Chloe had absolutely no idea where she had chosen to humiliate me. Not yet. My name is Martha Collins. I'm 68 years old, widowed, retired, at least officially. For nearly 40 years, I invested in healthcare systems across Texas. People assume investors spend their lives chasing numbers on computer screens. The good ones don't. I spent my career sitting in emergency rooms, meeting administrators, walking unfinished hospital wings, and deciding which facilities deserved another chance instead of another bankruptcy notice. Eventually, I had enough money that I could have disappeared to a beach somewhere. Instead, I kept investing. Hospitals matter. People only notice them when everything else has gone wrong. After my husband Daniel died 6 years ago, work became quieter. Retirement came a year later. Kevin kept telling everyone I was finally relaxing. That wasn't entirely true. I still attended quarterly board meetings. I still reviewed financial reports. And every now and then, I helped solve problems no one else wanted attached to their name. Just because you retire doesn't mean people stop calling, especially when you've spent decades becoming useful. Kevin never cared much about business. He became an architect, creative, gentle, sometimes too gentle. He hated confrontation from the time he was little. If another child took his toy, he'd simply find something else to play with. I used to think kindness was his greatest strength. Now I wondered if it had become his greatest weakness. When he introduced me to Chloe 3 years earlier, she was charming, funny, confident, ambitious. She worked in luxury real estate and could make almost anyone feel like the most interesting person in the room, including me, for a while. The first cracks were almost invisible. She began referring to my investments as our family's money. She joked that retirement meant I was basically a walking inheritance. Everyone laughed, even Kevin. I didn't. Some jokes reveal more than people intend. Still, I convinced myself I was being overly sensitive. Older people do that sometimes. We question our instincts because we're afraid of becoming the difficult parent everyone whispers about. Looking back, ignoring those small warnings was far more expensive than writing any check. Because the phone call I received 3 days before that hospital confrontation proved Chloe had already made plans involving my money. Plans she never intended to ask permission for. And what I heard on that call made me drive across Texas without telling either of them I was coming. 3 days before Chloe's outburst in the hospital lobby, I was pruning the roses behind my house when my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. Normally, I let unknown numbers go to voicemail. Retirement teaches you that half the world wants your money, and the other half wants your time. This call wanted both. "Mrs. Collins?" a hesitant female voice asked. "Speaking." "My name is Linda. I work in patient admissions at St. Gabriel Women's Hospital." There was a pause. Then she lowered her voice. I think there's been a mistake involving your account." "My account? I don't believe I have one." "That's exactly why I'm calling." Something in her tone made me sit down. "I probably shouldn't be making this call," she whispered. "But your name keeps appearing on documents that require financial authorization." I frowned. "What documents?" Another pause. "A maternity package." I almost laughed. "I think you've called the wrong Martha Collins." I wish I had. Papers shuffled on her desk. "The reservation is under Kevin and Chloe Collins." My smile disappeared. Linda continued carefully. "They selected the Platinum Heritage Birth Experience. I had never heard of it," she explained anyway. "Private delivery suite, luxury recovery room, personal chef, around-the-clock newborn concierge, executive nursing team, valet privileges, champagne celebration dinner, professional newborn photography." I listened in silence. It sounded less like giving birth and more like checking into a five-star resort. Then she quietly mentioned the price. Just under $50,000. I actually thought I'd misheard her. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "Could you repeat that?" She did. Every digit. Humans have a remarkable ability to spend money that doesn't belong to them. Entire industries exist because of this curious talent. "There must be some confusion," I finally said. "There is," Linda replied. "Your name appears under responsible financial party." Those 4 words settled in my stomach like cold stone. "I never signed anything." "I know. You know. I've been here 12 years. Her voice became firmer. "I verify signatures every day. And I've never seen yours." The silence between us stretched. Finally, she said something that made every instinct I had sharpen at once. "Mrs. Collins, someone assured our billing department that obtaining your signature afterward wouldn't be a problem." Not before. Afterward. As though paying $50,000 was simply a formality. I thanked Linda and hung up. For nearly 10 minutes, I sat in the garden without moving. Not because of the money. $50,000 wouldn't ruin me. It was the assumption behind it. Someone had already decided what I would do, without asking, without discussing it, without even pretending I had a choice. I called Kevin immediately. No answer. Again, straight to voicemail. An hour later, he finally returned the call. He sounded distracted, almost nervous. "Mom, can I call you later? Did you reserve a luxury maternity package?" Silence, long enough to tell me everything. "It's complicated." "No, it really is." "Kevin," he sighed. "Chloe's under a lot of stress." "That's not what I asked." Another pause. Then the sentence I never expected to hear from my own son. "We assumed you'd want to do this for your grandson." "We," not Chloe. "We assumed." "When exactly were you planning to tell me?" "We didn't want to pressure you." I almost laughed. "You listed me as financially responsible." I was going to explain. "When?" "The day we checked in." Convenient. Corner me after the contractions started, after guests arrived, after emotions were high, after saying no would make me look heartless. It wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. And for the first time in Kevin's life, I realized he hadn't merely failed to stop someone from manipulating me. He had helped build the plan. I ended the call without raising my voice. Then I opened my laptop. Instead of looking at hospital prices, I searched for something else entirely. I wanted to know who had approved that paperwork, because there was one name I recognized on the authorization page, and seeing it there made me realize this wasn't just a family problem anymore. I expected to find a forged signature. Instead, I found something much more careful. The authorization form itself wasn't signed by me. It didn't need to be. Someone had entered my information as the anticipated guarantor, leaving the final signature section blank. Technically, no fraud had happened yet. They had simply built the entire process around the expectation that I would eventually give in. It was clever, too clever to be an accident. At the bottom of the paperwork was a name I recognized, Rebecca Harmon, Director of Patient Services. Rebecca and I had met years earlier at a fundraising dinner. She was competent, polished, and exceptionally protective of the hospital's reputation. We had never been friends, but she knew exactly who I was, which raised one uncomfortable question. Did she really believe I had agreed to this, or had someone convinced her? I picked up the phone. She answered on the second ring. "Martha." "It's been ages." Her cheerful tone vanished the moment I asked about Chloe's reservation. There was a brief silence. I assumed everything had been arranged. "Who told you that?" "Your daughter-in-law." "And why would you believe her?" Another pause. "She said you'd insisted on complete privacy." "I insisted?" "She said you didn't want anyone bothering you with paperwork because you'd handled these kinds of donations before." Donations. Interesting choice of word. A hospital donation is voluntary. A $50,000 invoice with my name attached is something else entirely. Rebecca sounded increasingly uncomfortable. "She also mentioned you preferred not to receive calls unless there was an emergency." I almost admired the confidence. Chloe hadn't just expected me to pay. She'd spent weeks building a version of me that conveniently couldn't be contacted. Rebecca lowered her voice. "Martha, is there a problem?" "There is now." She immediately offered to cancel the package. I told her not to. She hesitated. "I don't understand." "I'd rather understand everything before anyone changes anything." People reveal far more when they believe their plan is still working. If Rebecca canceled the reservation immediately, Chloe would simply invent another story. No, I wanted to watch this unfold. I thanked Rebecca and ended the call. Then I made one more. Not to Kevin, not to Chloe, to my attorney. Harold Jenkins had represented me for nearly 25 years. He'd seen ugly divorces, hostile takeovers, and one memorable dispute involving a billionaire who sued his own brother over a parking garage. He rarely sounded surprised. This time, he did. "They're expecting you to authorize payment after admission?" "Apparently." He chuckled once. Not because it was funny, because he'd recognized the tactic. They're trying to create social pressure. Exactly. If they ask in front of doctors, nurses, and family, refusing makes you look like the villain. That's the idea. Harold was quiet for a moment. "Don't sign anything. I wasn't planning to, and don't tell them you know." That had already become my plan. When people think they're winning, they stop hiding. The following afternoon, Kevin called again. His voice was softer this time. "Mom, Chloe's hormones have been all over the place." I said nothing. She didn't mean some of the things she said. Still nothing. "Can we just have dinner tomorrow?" "There isn't going to be a dinner." "What do you mean? I'll meet you at the hospital." "The hospital?" When Chloe checks in, his breathing caught. "You don't have to come that early." "I think I do." For the first time since this began, Kevin sounded genuinely frightened. Not angry, not defensive, frightened, as if my presence would ruin something they'd already carefully arranged. When we hung up, I opened an old leather folder in my study. Inside was a single card that I hadn't carried in years. Simple, white, no fancy logo, just my name, and a title that very few people outside the executive offices ever saw. I slipped it into my handbag. Something told me I'd finally have a reason to use it. The hospital parking garage was nearly full when I arrived just after 7 that morning. Luxury SUVs. Fresh flowers being carried through the entrance. Grandparents clutching gift bags wrapped in pastel paper. For most families, this was one of the happiest days of their lives. For mine, it felt like walking into a business negotiation where everyone else already believed the contract had been signed. The receptionist recognized me immediately. Not because of my name, because I'd visited the hospital enough over the years that some of the long-term staff still remembered me. She smiled. "Good morning, Mrs. Collins." Before she could say another word, Chloe interrupted from across the lobby. "There you are." She wasn't smiling, she was evaluating me. Her eyes dropped to my handbag, then to the simple pearl necklace I wore. No designer labels, no expensive jewelry. She'd once told Kevin I dressed like someone who forgot she was rich. The truth was simpler. People reveal themselves more quickly when they underestimate you. "You took your time," Chloe said. "I came when I was ready." She crossed her arms. "The admissions office has been waiting." "Interesting. Not we." The admissions office. Everything had already been scheduled. Kevin hurried over, looking exhausted. He kissed my cheek without meeting my eyes. "Morning, Mom." His voice barely carried. He looked as though he hadn't slept. Whether from excitement about becoming a father or anxiety about what was about to happen, I couldn't yet tell. Chloe took control of the conversation before either of us could speak. "We picked the Magnolia Suite." She said it proudly, like she'd earned it. "It's the nicest room they have." "I've heard. It books months in advance. I'm aware." She frowned. My calmness seemed to irritate her. People preparing for a fight often become unsettled when the other person refuses to throw the first punch. A nurse approached, carrying a clipboard. "Mrs. Chloe Collins?" "That's me. We just need the financial paperwork completed before we escort you upstairs." There it was, right on schedule. The nurse turned politely toward me. "And Mrs. Martha Collins?" Before she could finish, Chloe answered for me. "My mother-in-law will take care of it." Not, "Would you?" Not if she's willing. "Will." The nurse smiled professionally and extended the clipboard. I didn't take it. Instead, I looked directly at her. "I'm sorry." The smile faded. "I don't believe these documents belong to me." The lobby became noticeably quieter. People don't usually stop talking all at once. They simply begin listening harder. Chloe laughed. A short, dismissive laugh. "Martha, don't make this awkward. I wasn't aware it was supposed to be awkward." Kevin rubbed his forehead. "Mom," Chloe stepped closer. "We've already discussed this." "No," I replied evenly. "You discussed it." Her expression hardened. "You're really choosing today to be difficult?" I wasn't aware declining a $50,000 bill counted as being difficult. Several heads turned. The nurse looked from Chloe to me, suddenly unsure who was actually in charge. Chloe's voice rose another level. "You can absolutely afford it." "I can." "So what's the problem?" "The problem," I said quietly, "is that my bank account isn't a family tradition." Kevin whispered, "Please," but Chloe wasn't listening anymore. She had an audience now, and audiences can be addictive. She pointed toward the elevators. "Our baby deserves the best." "I agree, so prove it." I studied her for a long second. Then I asked the simplest question of the morning. "Did you ever think to ask whether I'd already decided how I wanted to help my grandchild?" That caught her off guard, only for a moment. Then she smiled, a confident, almost triumphant smile. "We already know the answer." No, she believed she did. Those are two very different things. Before I could respond, the elevator doors opened. A tall man in a navy suit stepped into the lobby. The hospital's chief executive officer. He wasn't supposed to be there that morning. Yet the moment he saw me, he changed direction and began walking straight toward us. And judging by the look on Chloe's face, she assumed he was coming to make sure I paid. The lobby seemed to hold its breath. The chief executive officer walked toward us with the measured confidence of someone used to making decisions that affected hundreds of people every day. His name was Dr. Terstog, Michael Reeves. We'd known each other for almost 15 years, not socially, professionally. The last time we'd spoken in person had been nearly 8 months earlier at a quarterly review meeting. Chloe, of course, knew none of that. Her shoulders relaxed. She smiled as if help had finally arrived. Perfect, she said loudly. Maybe you can explain to my mother-in-law how hospital billing works. Dr. Reeves stopped in front of us. For one brief moment, his eyes met mine. There was the slightest flicker of recognition. Then it disappeared behind a perfectly neutral expression. Good. He understood immediately. I wasn't ready for anyone to reveal anything. Not yet. Good morning, he said politely. The nurse handed him the clipboard. There seems to be some confusion regarding financial responsibility. I'm sure there is, he replied. Chloe stepped forward before anyone else could speak. My husband and I reserved the Magnolia Suite months ago. His mother agreed to cover everything, and now she's pretending she never said that. Dr. Reeves didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked a question. When exactly did Mrs. the Wheat Collins agree? Chloe blinked. Well, everyone knew she would. That wasn't my question. A small crease appeared between her eyebrows. It was understood. By whom? She looked toward Kevin. He swallowed. Neither of them answered. Silence has a way of becoming evidence, especially when everyone is waiting for a simple fact. Dr. Reeves turned to me. Mrs. Collins, have you signed any financial authorization for this admission? I have not. Have you verbally committed to paying these expenses? No. His nod was almost imperceptible. Thank you. He handed the clipboard back to the nurse. Then these documents cannot be processed in their current form. Chloe stared at him. What? The responsible party has declined responsibility. No, she's just embarrassed. I'm afraid that's irrelevant. You can't cancel my room. His expression remained calm. We haven't canceled anything. Then tell them to admit me. We will. Relief spread across her face. Then he finished the sentence, under the payment arrangements that actually exist. The color drained from her face. Kevin finally spoke. There has to be another solution. There usually is, Dr. Reeves replied, but it begins with accurate paperwork. For the first time all morning, Chloe's confidence cracked. She lowered her voice. Can we discuss this privately? You've conducted this conversation quite publicly so far. Several people nearby suddenly became very interested in their phones. No one wanted to admit they were listening. Every one of them was. Chloe took a slow breath. Then she tried a different approach. She reached for my hand. Martha. It was the warmest her voice had sounded in weeks. We're family. I looked at her hand resting on mine. Funny, she hadn't wanted to be family when she was calling me a miser. Now that $50,000 seemed uncertain, family had become very important again. I agree, I said quietly. Her face brightened. Families should never manipulate each other. Her hand slipped away. Kevin closed his eyes. He knew exactly where this was going. Chloe didn't, not yet. She straightened her shoulders one last time. If you refuse to help us today, she let the sentence hang. Don't expect to be part of this baby's life. The words echoed through the lobby. Even the receptionist looked shocked. Kevin whispered, Chloe, but she wasn't finished. You'll never meet your grandson. There it was. Not a request, not even a demand anymore, a threat. And strangely, the moment she said it, every doubt I still had disappeared. I slowly opened my handbag. Not to take out a checkbook, not to reach for my wallet, but to remove one small white business card that almost no patient had ever seen. I placed it gently on the admissions counter. Dr. Reeves looked down, then back at me. His expression changed instantly. He gave a single, respectful nod. Mrs. Collins, he said carefully, would you and I step into my office? Behind me, Chloe smiled. She thought the meeting was about convincing me. She had no idea she'd just invited herself into the only room in the building where the balance of power was about to change completely. The walk from the lobby to Dr. Reeves's office took less than a minute. It felt much longer. Behind us, I could hear Chloe's heels clicking confidently across the polished floor. She hadn't been invited. That didn't stop her. Kevin followed a few steps behind, looking like a man who already knew he was about to witness something he couldn't undo. Inside the executive suite, Dr. Reeves held the office door open. "Mrs. Collins." I stepped inside. Chloe tried to follow. The executive assistant rose from her desk. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This office is restricted." Chloe smiled politely. "I'm family." The assistant returned an equally polite smile. "So is she." She nodded toward me. "And she's expected." Chloe frowned. "What do you mean, expected?" Dr. Reeves answered before anyone else could. "Mrs. Day Collins attends executive meetings here." For the first time since I'd arrived, Chloe looked genuinely confused. She glanced at me, then at the hallway, then back to Dr. Reeves. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." "There hasn't." Kevin shifted uneasily. "Mom, why are you in executive meetings?" I looked at my son. "You never asked." That wasn't entirely fair. Years ago, he'd asked once or twice what I did after retirement. I'd answered honestly. "Board meetings." He assumed I meant charity boards. He'd never cared enough to ask which ones. People often hear only the parts of conversations that fit the story they've already written in their minds. Dr. Reeves picked up the white card I'd left on his desk. He turned it toward Chloe. Printed beneath my name were only 8 words: board member, principal investment committee, nothing more. No gold lettering, no dramatic title, just enough information for anyone inside the healthcare industry to understand exactly where I stood. Chloe stared at it, then laughed. A nervous laugh. "So, you're on some committee?" Dr. Reeves folded his hands. "Mrs. Collins has served on our governing board for 11 years. The room became very quiet. "She also chaired the investment oversight committee during our expansion." Silence. "And," he paused deliberately, "she personally led the financing group that prevented this hospital from entering bankruptcy 9 years ago." Kevin looked at me as though he were seeing a stranger. "You never told me. I didn't think my work required an audience." Chloe shook her head. "This doesn't make any sense." "It doesn't? You said you were retired." "I am." "But," she looked desperately at Kevin, "you said she just invested in stocks." He didn't answer, because he suddenly realized how little he actually knew about my career. I'd never hidden it. I'd simply never advertised it. Dr. Reeves opened a cabinet and removed a thick binder. Annual governance reports, board rosters, committee records. He placed it on the desk. My photograph appeared on the first page, taken several years earlier. There I was, smiling politely beside the hospital's leadership team. Chloe's confidence finally disappeared. "You own this hospital?" I corrected her gently. "No." A brief pause. "I own part of it." Her shoulders relaxed for half a second. Then Dr. Reeves added, Mrs. Beeries added, "Collins also represents the investment consortium that currently holds the hospital's largest block of secured debt." The words seemed to pass straight through Chloe. She clearly didn't understand them. Kevin did. His face went pale. "Architects don't spend their lives studying corporate finance. But they know what debt means, especially secured debt." He looked at Dr. Reeves. If something happened," the CEO answered quietly, "the lenders would ultimately decide this hospital's future." Kevin slowly turned toward me. Realization settled over him piece by piece. "You weren't just invited here today. No. I came because this is one of the few places where people usually tell me the truth." Nobody spoke. Finally, Chloe found her voice. "So what?" It came out sharper than she'd intended. "So you're important here." She folded her arms. "That still doesn't change the fact that your grandson deserves the best." I looked at her for several long seconds. Then I asked the question she'd spent weeks avoiding. "Why does the best only count if someone else pays for it?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Before she could recover, another knock sounded at the office door. Dr. Reeves looked toward the hallway. "The billing director is here." He turned back to me. "And I believe you'll want to hear what she found." The room suddenly felt much smaller, because whatever came next was no longer about assumptions, it was about evidence. The billing director entered carrying a slim gray folder, not a stack of papers, just one folder. In my experience, the smallest files often contained the biggest problems. "Mrs. Collins," she said, taking a seat across from me. "Dr. Curios. Reeves asked me to review every communication related to the Collins reservation." She opened the folder. "We found something unusual." Chloe straightened in her chair. "I already explained everything." The billing director didn't even look at her. "I'm sure you did." She slid 3 printed emails across the desk. "They're all from the same personal email address." Kevin leaned forward, his shoulders immediately tensed. "I've never seen these." "I didn't send them to you," Chloe replied quickly. No one had accused her. Yet she'd already admitted something. The first email had been sent almost 4 months earlier. Its subject line read, "Family Payment Arrangement." The billing director read a short excerpt. "Mrs. Martha Collins prefers not to discuss money directly. Please contact me instead. She has already agreed to cover all maternity expenses." I looked up. "I never wrote that. We know." The second email was worse. It instructed hospital staff not to contact me because I was overwhelmed by retirement paperwork and had delegated all communication to Chloe. Rebecca had believed it. The admissions department had believed it. Everyone had acted in good faith, based on lies. Then came the third email. The room grew noticeably quieter as the billing director placed it on top. This one concerned us. Dr. Reeves picked it up first. His jaw tightened. He handed it to me without a word. I read it once, then again. The message was only a few sentences long. "If Mrs. Collins hesitates on the day of admission, please handle everything discreetly. She would never embarrass herself in front of family by refusing payment." There it was, written plainly. The entire strategy. Not hope, not misunderstanding, pressure. Public pressure. Kevin slowly looked toward his wife. "You wrote this." She hesitated. "It wasn't meant like that." "Did you write it?" "Yes." His voice cracked. "You planned this?" "I planned for your mother to stop treating us like children." I folded the email carefully and laid it back on the desk. "No." Everyone turned toward me. "You planned to remove my ability to choose." Chloe threw up her hands. "You still could have said no." I nodded. "In theory." Then I looked at Kevin. "But not without becoming the woman who abandoned her pregnant daughter-in-law in a hospital." He lowered his eyes. Because he understood. That image would have spread through the family in hours. Neighbors would have heard. Friends would have heard. No one would have cared about the paperwork. They would have remembered only one sentence. Martha refused to help. That had always been the real weapon, not the invoice. The shame. Dr. Reeves broke the silence. "Mrs. Collins, these emails should never have been enough to assign financial responsibility." He looked genuinely disappointed. "We'll be reviewing our procedures immediately." I appreciated that. People make mistakes. Institutions fix them by admitting they exist. Individuals usually don't. Chloe leaned forward. "So what now?" There wasn't even an apology, just another demand. "What happens to my room?" Not, "What happens to my family?" Not, "Kevin, are you okay?" Just the room. I finally understood something that had bothered me for months. This had never been about childbirth. It had become a performance, a luxury suite, premium photographs, designer gift baskets, social media announcements, an experience designed to impress people she'd probably forget within a year. The baby had become part of the branding. And that realization saddened me far more than the money ever had. Dr. Reeves looked toward me. "As the situation currently stands, the reservation no longer meets the financial requirements." He chose his words carefully. "There are several options." I reached into my handbag once more. This time, I removed my reading glasses. I put them on, reviewed the reservation agreement one last time, and signed exactly one line. Not the payment authorization. A different page. Dr. Reeves read it. He nodded once. "I'll have this processed immediately." Chloe smiled in relief. She assumed I'd finally agreed. She even reached for Kevin's hand. Neither of them noticed the heading at the top of the page. Transfer of Patient Services. By the time they understood what I'd actually signed, it would already be too late to stop it. No one spoke while Dr. Coppin. Reeves finished reading the document. Then he closed the folder. "Mrs. Collins," he said, "just so we're perfectly clear, you're withdrawing your financial sponsorship." "I am," he nodded. "And you're also revoking the courtesy authorization attached to the Magnolia Suite, correct?" He looked toward the billing director. "Please update the reservation immediately." She stood without hesitation. "I'll notify admissions." Chloe finally leaned forward. "What does that mean?" the billing director answered calmly. "It means the VIP reservation is no longer guaranteed." "What?" "The suite was being held under a private financial guarantee." "No," Chloe snapped. "It's being held because we booked it. You requested it." The billing director chose her words carefully. "It was approved because staff believed payment had already been secured." The room became very quiet. Kevin slowly looked at the reservation paperwork. For the first time, he actually read it, not the glossy brochure, the contract. Halfway down the second page, he found the clause, "VIP accommodations remain subject to verified financial authorization." His shoulders dropped. "It's right here," he whispered. Chloe grabbed the paperwork from him. She scanned it once, then again. "No," her voice sounded smaller now. "This isn't what Rebecca told us." Dr. Reeves answered gently. "Rebecca acted on information she believed was accurate." He slid the printed emails across the desk. "Information your wife provided." Kevin closed his eyes. Every excuse he'd been holding on to for weeks disappeared in a matter of seconds. Hormones, stress, miscommunication. None of them explained 3 carefully written emails. None of them explained months of planning. Chloe stood so abruptly her chair rolled backward. "This is ridiculous." "No," I replied. "It is unfortunate. You can fix this." I could. Her eyes lit up. For one brief moment, I saw hope return. Then I finished the sentence. "I simply won't." Silence. "You'd really do this to your own grandson?" There it was again. Always the grandson. Never herself. Never Kevin. Never the choices that had brought us here. I folded my hands on the table. "My grandson deserves loving parents." She stared at me. "He deserves honesty. Nothing. He deserves adults who don't build their future on someone else's wallet." Kevin looked as though each sentence physically hurt. Because none of them were directed at the baby. They were directed at the 2 people responsible for him. Dr. Reeves cleared his throat. "I want everyone to understand the options available." He turned the monitor so all of us could see. "There are 3. He raised one finger. "You may keep the Magnolia Suite by paying today's required deposit." A second finger. "You may move into one of our standard maternity rooms, which provides the same physicians, nurses, and medical care." Then the third. "If you prefer another provider, we can arrange a transfer to the County Women's Hospital, assuming your physician approves." He looked directly at Chloe. "No patient here will ever be denied safe medical care because of finances." The sentence landed exactly as it should. This was never about health care. It was about luxury, about appearances, about proving something to people outside this room. Chloe looked around desperately. At Kevin. At Dr. Reeves. At me. She was waiting for someone to rescue her. No one moved. Finally, she spoke through clenched teeth. "I don't want a standard room." Dr. Reeves nodded once. "I understand. I booked the Magnolia Suite. You requested it. I deserve it." He didn't argue. He simply asked, "Will you be providing today's deposit?" The silence that followed answered before she did. For the first time since this began, there was no one left to pressure, no one left to threaten, no one left to blame, only a decision. And this time, it would actually have to be hers. No one rushed Chloe. No one argued. The room had become strangely quiet, the way it does after the truth has finally been spoken and there's nothing left to hide behind. Dr. Reeves folded the paperwork and slid it toward her. "Take a few minutes if you need them." She didn't even look at it. Instead, she turned to Kevin. "Tell them." He didn't answer. "Kevin." Still nothing. She grabbed his arm. "Tell your mother she's overreacting." He slowly looked up. For the first time that morning, he wasn't looking at me. He was looking directly at his wife. "When were you going to tell me about the emails?" She blinked. When? I was trying to protect us." "No." His voice remained calm. "You were trying to corner my mother." Her expression hardened again. "I was trying to build a better life for our son, with someone else's money." She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried another angle. "You grew up comfortable because of her." "I grew up because of her." He shook his head. "Those aren't the same thing." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not pride. Sadness. My son had finally found his voice. I only wished it hadn't taken something like this. Chloe looked from him to me, searching for an opening. "You planned this?" "No. You embarrassed me. You did that yourself." Her breathing became uneven. "You wanted everyone to think I'm some kind of gold digger." I answered quietly. "I wanted everyone to know the truth. There's an important difference. People can survive embarrassment. Truth is much harder to escape." Dr. Reeves's assistant knocked gently before stepping inside. "Doctor, labor and delivery just called." Everyone turned. Collins's contractions have become more regular. The room changed instantly. Everything else became secondary. This was no longer an argument. A baby was coming. Dr. Reeves stood. "The medical team is ready." He looked at Chloe. "We need your decision now." She stared at the contract one last time, then pushed it away. "I'm not paying." No surprise there. Dr. Reeves nodded. "The standard maternity room is available immediately." I said, "I'm not staying here." Kevin looked startled. "Chloe," she ignored him. "I'll go somewhere else. The county hospital has already confirmed they can receive you if that's your preference," Dr. Reeves replied. "I don't care where." She grabbed her designer handbag from the chair. "We're leaving." Kevin didn't move. She looked back. "Aren't you coming?" He looked at the floor, then at me, then back at her. Finally, he asked the question that should have been asked months earlier. "Why didn't you just ask my mother?" Chloe laughed bitterly. "Because she'd have said no." I nodded. "Probably." She frowned. "What? If you'd asked me to help with medical expenses, I would have paid every legitimate bill without hesitation." Nobody spoke. I continued. "If you'd asked me to help start a college fund for my grandson, I would have opened one that afternoon." Kevin's eyes widened. "If you'd asked for a down payment on a home so the baby could grow up somewhere stable." I smiled sadly. "We could have talked." Chloe stood frozen. Every possibility she'd tried to steal had actually been available. She'd simply chosen manipulation over honesty. And in doing so, she'd lost far more than a luxury hospital suite. She'd lost trust. There's no premium package that can buy that back. Without another word, she walked out. The office door closed behind her. Kevin remained exactly where he was. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. Then, in a voice I hadn't heard since he was a little boy, he quietly said, "I'm sorry, Mom. Not for the money, for everything." I believed him. But forgiveness, like trust, doesn't arrive all at once. It begins with what happens next. And none of us yet knew what that would be. Kevin didn't leave with Chloe. That surprised everyone, including me. He stood in Dr. Reeves's office for another minute, staring at the closed door as if willing it to open again. It never did. Finally, he looked at me. "I need to go with her." "You do." "I don't know if she's ever going to forgive me. That's her decision." He nodded slowly. "But I hope one day you'll forgive me." I rested my hand on his shoulder. Being forgiven and rebuilding trust are two different things. He swallowed. "I know." Then he hurried down the hallway. The office fell quiet. Dr. Reeves removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. I've been in hospital administration for 22 years, he said. I've seen arguments over inheritance, custody, insurance, but I've never seen someone try to use childbirth as leverage quite like this. Neither have I answered. The billing director spoke next. We're changing our admissions policy. I looked at her. Any financial guarantor will now have to verify authorization personally before premium services are confirmed. I smiled. That's probably overdue. Very. If anything good came from that morning, perhaps another family would never find themselves sitting in that same office. 3 weeks passed before Kevin called again. His voice sounded older, not because time had passed, because consequences had. Mom, could you come over? When I arrived, there were no balloons, no catered lunch, no staged family photographs, just exhaustion. The county hospital had delivered a perfectly healthy baby boy. Mother and child were doing well. The luxury suite hadn't made the slightest difference. The doctors had, the nurses had, the care had. The rest had simply been decoration. Kevin opened the front door holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. I'd like you to meet Ethan, my grandson. He weighed less than 8 pounds. His hands were impossibly small, one finger instinctively wrapped around mine. He had no idea adults had spent months arguing about money before he took his first breath. Good. Children deserve to arrive in the world without inheriting their parents' conflicts. I looked up. Where's Chloe? Kevin hesitated. Resting. He didn't volunteer more. I didn't ask. Some conversations belong to the people living them. A few minutes later, Chloe quietly entered the living room. She looked different, not because she'd just had a baby, because certainty had disappeared from her face. She sat down across from me. For almost a full minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. I owe you an apology. Simple. No excuses, no mention of hormones, no blaming stress, no blaming pregnancy. Just 7 words. I was wrong. I studied her carefully. People often apologize because they want something. This didn't feel like that. She looked tired, embarrassed, human. I can't promise everything goes back to the way it was, I said. I know, but Ethan deserves a family that's better than the one we were becoming. A tear slipped down her cheek. I know. For the first time since this entire nightmare began, I believed her. Not completely. Trust isn't rebuilt with a single conversation. It's rebuilt with dozens of quiet decisions afterward. But every bridge has to begin with one plank. Perhaps this was ours. Months later, Ethan learned to laugh, then crawl, then chase the family dog around the backyard. He never cared where he had been born. He never asked whether there had been a magnolia suite. He only cared that someone was there when he reached out. Children have a remarkable way of reminding adults what actually matters. The hospital kept its promise. Its admissions policies changed. Rebecca called me personally to apologize. Linda, the admissions employee who'd quietly warned me, received formal recognition for doing the ethical thing instead of the convenient one. And Kevin, he began asking questions. Not about my money, about my life. For the first time in years, we started rebuilding something that had been neglected long before Chloe entered the picture. Sometimes a crisis doesn't destroy a family. It reveals the cracks that were already there. Only then can anyone decide whether to walk away or repair them. Families rarely fall apart because of one argument. More often, they unravel one assumption at a time. The assumption that love guarantees access, that generosity creates obligation, that kindness means someone will never say no. Martha reminded me of something important. You can love people deeply without surrendering your boundaries, and you can refuse manipulation without refusing compassion. If you've ever faced a moment where someone confused your kindness with your obligation, I hope this story reminds you that those are not the same thing. Thank you for spending part of your day with me here at Beatrice's Quiet Tales. Before you go, I'd love to know your thoughts. What would you have done if you had been in Martha's place? Would you have paid for the VIP berth, or would you have drawn the same line she did? I'll be reading through the comments, and as always, I look forward to hearing the different perspectives people bring from all over the world.